I never pictured myself as the kind of guy who'd plan his own death. But there I was, 27, sitting in a cubicle lit by humming fluorescent bulbs, watching another spreadsheet load on my monitor, and realizing this couldn't be all there was. Wake up, shower, cram onto the subway, sit in traffic, type numbers, pretend to smile at people I didn't care about, then drag myself home to a one-bedroom that felt more like a storage unit than a place to live. Eat, sleep, repeat. Some nights I'd just lie on my back staring at the ceiling, feeling my chest tighten with that heavy truth. If I made it to 60 or 70, this was still gonna be it. Same loop, same paycheck barely covering rent, same tired weekends where I scrolled on my phone pretending I had a life. And then one day I'd die, and someone would box me up, stick me in the ground, and that would be the end. So I thought, why wait? It wasn't some dramatic impulse. It was calm, cold, like running a hand across glass and realizing it's clean enough, you're done polishing. I didn't want to make a mess at home, didn't want my family to be the ones to find me. My mom still texted me every Sunday like clockwork. I couldn't do that to her. If I disappeared somewhere far away, it'd be easier. Just another missing face in a city full of them. The idea of dying somewhere no one knew me started to take root. Not a motel room, not a bridge, something quieter, cleaner. One night I sat with a cheap whiskey scrolling maps on my laptop until I zoomed out past the city, past the suburbs, to the forgotten gray patches marked Old Cemetery on the outskirts. That felt right, a place already meant for the dead. I started prepping like it was a trip, not an ending. Picked up over-the-counter sleeping pills from 3 different pharmacies, so no one would notice how many I had. Cashed out what little savings sat in my account, enough for gas, a tank of cheap food, and nothing more. I told my boss I was taking time off. He didn't ask why. Nobody ever really cared where I went. The drive out felt unreal. The city shrank behind me, skyscrapers giving way to tired suburbs, then open stretches of cracked asphalt where weeds poked through. My phone lost signal. The car radio dissolved into static. I almost turned around once, but then I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Pale, tired eyes that didn't recognize themselves anymore. There wasn't anything to go back to. When I finally pulled up to the cemetery, dusk had settled in. The place looked like nobody had tended it in decades. Stone angels leaned sideways, names on the markers worn smooth by rain and time. A sagging gate clanged shut behind me when I pushed it. I walked with the pills rattling in my pocket, listening to the sound of my own shoes crunching on gravel. No traffic, no voices. Just me, the dark and the quiet rows of the dead. I found an open crypt near the back, its stone door cracked enough for me to slip through. Inside smelled like damp earth and mold. I sat down against the wall, shook the pills into my palm, and swallowed them dry. No prayers, no notes, no second thoughts. I closed my eyes and thought, finally it ends here. I don't remember when the darkness changed. At first it was the thick, heavy black that comes when you close your eyes too long. Then there was weight pressing down on me. Real weight, crushing, suffocating. My throat burned. My chest screamed for air. I tried to roll over, but the space around me was tight, hard, unyielding. That's when panic hit. I clawed at the darkness, my fingernails scraping wood. Not dirt yet. Wood. The dull, close thud of it. A box. My box. My grave. My brain refused it at first. I'd taken the pills. I should have been gone. Maybe this was hell or some half-dream. But the splinters under my nails, the smell of raw pine and soil bleeding through cracks, it was too real. My pulse banged against my skull. I wasn't gone, I was buried. I slammed my fists upward. The coffin rattled, but it held. Dust sifted down into my mouth, choking me. I screamed, raw and hoarse, knowing nobody could hear. My voice bounced back at me, muffled by 6 feet of earth. The air felt thinner by the minute. Every breath turned ragged. My chest heaved against the lid as if my body was trying to shove it off by itself. I thought about my lungs collapsing, about the way people said suffocation made you see stars. I kicked, I punched. My palms bled against the wood. Something cracked, not the lid, but my skin. Warm blood slicked my fingers. My body screamed, "Give up." But the animal part of me refused. I wasn't dying like this, not pressed into the ground like some mistake in a cheap box. I shifted sideways, pressing with my shoulder, and felt the coffin groan. The wood creaked, a sick, splintering sound. For a second I thought I imagined it, then another crack split the silence. Dirt rained onto my face, clumps spilling past my lips. I gagged, spat, pushed harder. The whole lid gave way in a thunderous crunch. Suddenly I was falling, weightless for a breath, then slamming into something damp and unsteady below. The impact knocked the air out of me. I lay stunned, sucking in the cold, mold-scented air of wherever I'd landed. My hand slid across something soft but unyielding. At first I thought it was mud, then my fingers caught cloth. I jerked back, heart racing. The shape beside me wasn't earth. It was a body. I scrambled to my knees. The beam from a broken coffin above me spilled just enough light to see them. 6 shapes piled together, tangled in rotting clothes. A pale hand curled out from beneath the heap, nails broken and packed with dirt. The face beside it was slack-jawed, sockets black with rot. I gagged so hard my ribs ached. My stomach clenched, but nothing came out. The smell was unbearable, sweet, cloying, the kind that stuck to the back of your tongue. I staggered back and hit another shape. My fingers brushed a chest. It wasn't moving. But the skin was soft, not yet stiff. Too fresh. That's when I realized what had happened. I hadn't clawed out of my grave. I'd fallen through into something worse. A pit. A hollow under the cemetery where the bodies they didn't want to bury went. I wasn't supposed to be alive, but I was. And now I was down here with the ones who weren't. Somewhere deeper in the dark, something shifted. Not wood, not stone, flesh. And then I heard it, the faintest rasp of breath that didn't belong to me. I froze, my ears strained in the dark, desperate to catch it again. At first, nothing, just my own heart slamming in my chest. Then it came, unmistakable this time, a wet, shallow inhale. I wasn't alone. The instinct to call out hit me, but the words died in my throat. What if whoever, whatever, was down here wasn't supposed to be moving? My skin prickled, my body screaming to get away, even though there was nowhere to run. I crouched lower, trying to make myself small. My palm landed on something smooth, cold. I didn't want to know what it was, but curiosity beat fear. I traced it with trembling fingers until I found teeth, a jaw. The skull shifted under my touch and rolled away into the pile. The sound it made, bone knocking against bone, was enough to wake the pit. I heard another shuffle, then another. I wasn't imagining it. My eyes had adjusted enough to make out vague shapes in the gloom. The heap of bodies wasn't still. Limbs twitched, torsos convulsed as though some broken rhythm passed through them. The pit was breathing. No, I whispered to myself, shaking my head, refusing the sight. My brain clawed for logic. Maybe gases, maybe the earth shifting. Anything but this. But then something rose from the pile. A torso dragged itself upright, skin hanging in strips, skull half exposed. It turned toward me, eyes empty sockets but locked on me all the same. I scrambled backward, slipping on the slick floor. My hands smeared with filth as I pushed myself away. Another figure stirred, then another. The sound of shuffling bones and wet tearing filled the chamber until it drowned out my own ragged breaths. They weren't alive, not in the way I was. But they weren't resting either. I shoved myself against the wall, praying it was solid. praying it wouldn't give way again. The bodies began to slide off one another, pulled by some unseen force deeper into the cavern. They moved clumsily, like puppets dragged on tangled strings, but the direction was the same. Down. Always down. I held my breath, not daring to follow. My mind screamed at me to climb, to claw my way back to the broken coffin above, but one look told me it was impossible. The collapse had sealed it. Dirt and splintered wood choked the hole, which left one choice: follow them. The thought turned my stomach, but sitting in this rot, waiting to suffocate or starve, was worse. I pressed a hand over my nose and mouth and stepped carefully into the shifting mass. Flesh slipped beneath my bare feet, and I bit down hard to keep from retching. The bodies moved as if guided by a current. I let it take me. We descended together, deeper into the earth, until even the faint beam of daylight from above was gone. After what felt like hours, the slope leveled out. The air grew warmer. My hands brushed against something strange, smooth, metallic, almost warm to the touch. Not rock, not wood. It hummed faintly, like the vibration of a machine. The corpses piled forward and were gone, sliding through an opening I couldn't see. I pressed my palm flat against the surface and felt it pulse, steady, alive. A shiver ran through me. This wasn't just a pit. This was something built, something waiting. Behind me, the shifting stopped. Silence settled again, thick and suffocating. And then, like a sigh, the metal wall slid open. The wall split with a hiss, a seam of light spilling across the pit. It wasn't daylight, too cold, too white, humming with electricity. The corpses shuffled into the opening as if called home. Their slack limbs scraped across the floor, bones dragging, flesh leaving streaks on metal. I stood frozen, my back pressed to damp stone, fighting every instinct screaming at me to run. But there was nowhere left to go. The coffin above was sealed. The only way out was forward. I swallowed hard and stepped after them. The chamber swallowed me whole. The walls weren't dirt anymore, they were steel, fused with cables that pulsed faintly like veins. Panels flickered with a sickly glow, casting shadows that moved even when nothing else did. The smell changed too. Gone was the rot of the pit, replaced with something sharp, metallic, almost sterile, but undercut with the faint sweetness of decay. I followed the shuffle of the dead into a corridor that sloped downward. My bare feet slapped against cold plating, each step echoing far louder than I wanted. That's when I saw it. The first machine. It loomed in the dark like an altar, tall as 3 men, its surface slick with condensation. Tubes ran from it into the walls, disappearing into the black. And strapped across its face were bodies. Dozens of them. Their chests rose and fell in uneven jerks, as though the machine itself was forcing breath through them. Needles slid in and out of their flesh, pumping something clear into veins that had no business still working. I stumbled back, bile burning my throat. My skull buzzed with a single thought. This wasn't natural. This wasn't death anymore. One of the strapped figures twitched, its head lolling toward me, its mouth open on a wet gasp. The sound wasn't a scream. It was a word, whispered so faint I almost missed it. Run. I froze. My blood turned to ice. But before I could move, another machine came alive. Lights pulsed down the corridor, one after another, like the heartbeat of something enormous waking beneath the earth. A low vibration rolled through the floor, rattling my bones. The corpses that had led me here weren't lying still anymore. They were rising, standing upright as though answering a summons. Their limbs straightened, their empty sockets glowing faintly with the same pale light that pulsed through the walls. I backed away slowly, my heels scraping metal. The sound was too loud, and every head turned toward me in unison. My lungs seized. Then they stepped forward. Not in a stumble, not in a shuffle, but in perfect unison, as though something else had taken control of their strings. I ran. The corridor stretched forever, walls closing in as I pounded barefoot over steel. The hum rose to a scream in my ears. I rounded a corner, desperate for any break, any door. And there it was. Another seam in the wall, glowing faintly, half open like the one I'd come through. I dove for it. The metal closed behind me with a slam, sealing the dead out. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd made it. I leaned against the door, gasping, sweat stinging my eyes. Then I realized where I'd landed. This chamber was smaller, but lined floor to ceiling with glass tanks. Each one held a body suspended in fluid, eyes closed, faces pale but untouched by decay. And in the reflection of the glass lit by the pale glow, I saw myself. One tank, one body, my face, floating in silence, eyes closed, lips parted as though waiting to breathe. At first I thought it was a trick of the glass, some warped reflection the way light bends through water. But no, it was me, my face, my chest rising faintly as if alive. My body suspended in that pale fluid, hair drifting weightless like weeds. I staggered closer. My hands shook as I pressed them against the tank. The glass was cold, slick with condensation. I searched for flaws, anything that would explain it away. But the longer I stared, the more I knew it wasn't a reflection. It was real. That thing in the tank was me. The breath hitched in my throat. If I was standing here, barefoot and bleeding, who the hell was that? The body twitched. My copy's eyelids fluttered, the faintest ripple through the fluid. My stomach dropped. This wasn't some corpse preserved in glass. It was waking. I stumbled back, slamming into another tank. My shoulder throbbed, but the shock drew my eyes sideways. Dozens more. Not just me. Rows of strangers. Men, women, children. All suspended, all silent, faces eerily peaceful. Some looked freshly drawn, as if plucked from the world hours ago. Others bore spurns, injuries that should have ended them. Yet here they were, floating like specimens in jars. My head spun. Maybe this was some government thing or medical experiment, but deep down, I knew better. The pit, the machines, the corpses, they weren't human science, not entirely. The glass hissed. Tiny bubbles surged from the base of the tank holding my double. Its chest rose sharper, more insistent. Eyes cracked open. I froze. They weren't my eyes. They were too pale, too flat, glowing faint like the walls outside. Still, the sight hit me like a punch. My own face stared back, but stripped of warmth, hollowed out. It pressed one hand against the glass. Same hand as mine, same scars. The hum in the chamber spiked, vibrating through the floor. Other tanks stirred, bodies twitching as though the signal had reached them too. "No," I whispered, backing away. "Not me. You're not me." The glass groaned. A hairline crack spidered outward from my double's palm. Fluid seeped, dripping down like sweat. I turned and bolted. The room wasn't sealed like the last. On the far side, a hatch yawned open, spilling cold air from somewhere deeper below. I sprinted for it, not daring to look back. Behind me, the crack split with a sound like snapping bone. Fluid gushed, splashing across the floor. Then came the wet slap of feet hitting metal. I didn't wait to see more. I dropped through the hatch, sliding down a ladder slick with condensation. My feet hit another corridor, narrower this time, pipes crowding the ceiling. The air was warmer, close, as if I'd stepped into the throat of some living beast. Above, I heard movement, slow, deliberate. My double was loose. I pressed myself against the wall, chest heaving, trying to steady the panic before it drowned me. Because a thought had burrowed deep into my skull, one I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. Maybe I wasn't the original. Maybe I was just another one that got out. The corridor felt endless, a throat of steel swallowing me whole. Pipes hissed overhead, dripping condensation that pattered against my shoulders like sweat. Every sound echoed too loud, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Somewhere above, metal scraped against metal. Slow, deliberate. Footsteps, but heavier, steadier than my own ragged sprint. My double was hunting me. I pressed forward, one hand grazing the wall for balance. The floor sloped downward again, the air thickening with heat. My lungs felt raw, each breath like inhaling steam. The hum of machines deepened, vibrating through my ribs. The corridor widened into a junction. 3 paths yawning ahead, each darker than the last. I paused, chest heaving, trying to listen for any hint of movement, but the hum drowned everything. That's when I saw it, markings scorched into the metal floor. Not letters, not any language I knew. They looked more like claw marks, deep grooves that shimmered faintly as if still hot. Whatever had left them had passed through recently. A chill spread down my spine. Behind me, a thud. The hatch I'd come through slammed shut on its own. I spun, heart hammering. Silence. Then another thud, closer this time. No more waiting. I bolted down the left corridor. The walls pressed tighter here, ribs of steel arching overhead. My fingers brushed cables that felt almost warm, pulsing faintly like veins. The whole place breathed. I rounded a corner and stopped dead. The corridor opened into a chamber lit by a dull red glow. At its center stood another machine, smaller than the first ones I'd seen, but more intricate. Cables fed into a platform, and on that platform, a chair. Not just any chair. Restraints gleamed at the arms and legs, slick with something dark. A halo of needles hung above, suspended on delicate arms, waiting like a crown of thorns. Beside it lay a heap of clothes, ragged and stained. Jeans. A hoodie. My stomach lurched. They were mine, or close enough. I staggered back, shaking my head. No, this isn't me. Not again. A hiss cut the air. I spun. The hatch on the far side of the chamber slid open. And there it was. My double. It stepped through the glow like it belonged here, water still dripping from its hair, its face slack but steady. Those pale eyes fixed on me without blinking. Its movements weren't jerky, not puppet-like anymore. They were precise. Controlled. I stumbled backward until my calves hit the platform. The restraints clinked softly, metal against metal. My double tilted its head, studying me. Then, in a voice that wasn't quite mine but close enough to curdle my blood, it spoke. "You're not supposed to be awake." The words echoed through the chamber, swallowed by the hum of the machine. I shook my head, chest tight, words failing me. It stepped closer, each bare foot leaving faint wet prints on the steel. "You were meant to take your place," it said, calm, almost tender. "One sleeps, one serves. That's how it works." I pressed against the platform, shaking, every muscle screaming to run. But the chamber had only 2 exits. The way I came and the one it had just filled. No way out. The needles above the chair descended with a mechanical whine, their tips gleaming in the red light. And my double smiled. The machine's whine drilled into my skull, a swarm of needles lowering inch by inch. My double stood between me and the door, its pale eyes glowing in the red wash of the chamber. I could feel the heat of its presence, the weight of inevitability pressing down harder than the restraints on that chair. "No," I muttered, shaking my head. "I'm not." The words broke. My throat had nothing left but ragged breath. It tilted its head again, that same uncanny mirror of my own movements, like watching a delayed reflection. "You'll understand soon," it said. The voice was steadier now, less hollow, more mine. I braced for it to lunge, for cold hands to shove me into the chair. Instead, the chamber shuddered. A metallic groan ran through the walls, deep enough to rattle my teeth. Dust sifted down from the seams above. My double froze, its head snapping toward the sound. That was the split second I needed. I moved without thinking, vaulting sideways over the platform. My shoulders slammed into the edge, pain flaring white-hot, but momentum carried me past the machine. I hit the floor hard, palms skidding over the metal, and scrambled to my feet. Behind me, the needles clashed against the chair with a hiss, spraying sparks where they struck empty restraints. "Stop!" The command cracked through the air, heavy as stone. For a heartbeat, my muscles locked. It wasn't just a word, it was force, something deeper than sound. My double's voice carried weight that didn't belong to me. But fear pushed harder. I forced my legs to move, stumbling toward the hatch on the far side of the chamber. It slammed shut before I reached it. I cursed, spinning. My double was already closing the distance, steps deliberate, patient. The hum of the machine spiked again, but different this time, higher pitched, almost frantic. Then, another sound, footsteps. Not mine, not his. From a side passage I hadn't noticed, someone stumbled into the chamber. A man, tall, gaunt, his face streaked with grime and sweat. His eyes darted between me and my double, and for a second I thought he was another reflection, until he spoke. "Don't let it touch you." His voice was raw, hoarse, but urgent. My double turned to him, expression unchanged. The man raised something I hadn't seen in weeks, an old crowbar, rusted, bent, but solid in his grip. He swung without hesitation. The metal cracked against my double's shoulder with a hollow clang, like striking steel instead of flesh. My double staggered, but didn't fall. The man shouted over the machine's roar. "Run! Down the service shaft!" He pointed toward a grate half hidden beneath the platform, its bolts half rusted through. I didn't think. I dropped to my knees, clawing at the grate. My nails tore, my palms split open, but one bolt snapped, then another. Behind me, the chamber exploded in sound, the crowbar clanging, my double's voice rising in that unnatural command tone, the man grunting with effort. The last bolt gave. I ripped the grate open and slid into the shaft, darkness swallowing me whole. As I fell, the last thing I heard wasn't the man's voice or the machine's hum. It was my double's, low and certain, echoing down the steel. "You can't outrun yourself." The fall wasn't long, but it was brutal. I slammed shoulder first into a grate before tumbling onto a narrow catwalk. Metal screamed beneath my weight, but it held. My breath tore out of me in ragged gasps, pain radiating through every bone. For a moment I just lay there, staring into the dark. The shaft stretched both above and below, ribbed with pipes that bled steam. The hum of machinery was louder here, not just a sound but a vibration that worked its way into my teeth. I pushed myself up. My palms burned raw, sticky with blood. Every nerve in my body told me to curl up, to shut down, but above me, faint clangs echoed. My double. It was coming. I staggered forward along the catwalk. The air was hotter here, metallic, thick with some chemical tang that made my throat ache. The deeper I went, the more the walls closed in. Pipes pressed so close I had to twist sideways to squeeze through. Half blind in the dark, my foot caught on something. I pitched forward, catching myself against the rail. When I looked down, my heart nearly stopped. Boot prints. Not mine, too big, fresh. Someone had been down here, and not long ago. I followed, every step a mix of dread and hope. The catwalk curved, descending tighter into the earth until the space opened into a small maintenance bay. Rusted lockers lined one wall, doors hanging open. Tools were scattered across the floor, wrenches, wire cutters, a cracked helmet smeared with dried blood. And on the far wall, scratched deep into the metal with something sharp, were words. "Don't trust your face." My breath caught. My skin went cold. Whoever wrote that had seen them too, the doubles. The clang above grew louder, closer. I yanked open a locker, desperate for anything. My hands closed on a flashlight, its casing dented but intact. I thumbed the switch. A weak beam cut through the dark, barely enough to see. But it was light, and right now that was salvation. Another locker gave me a coil of rope, frayed but usable. No weapon, though. Not unless I counted the jagged wrench I stuffed into my waistband. The clang turned into a slam. The grate above screeched against its bolts. My double was tearing its way in. Panic shoved me into motion. On the far side of the bay, a hatch led into another tunnel, this one even narrower. I ducked inside, dragging the rope and light with me. The tunnel forced me to crawl, knees scraping against metal, each breath echoing like a drumbeat. Behind me, the grate gave way with a shriek. I pushed faster, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the walls. Then it caught something that froze me in place. A handprint, smeared across the tunnel wall in dried, rusty red. Human. And just ahead, the tunnel widened into another chamber. But this one wasn't empty. Shapes moved inside, hunched, shifting in the beam of my light. For a moment I thought they were more doubles. Then one of them turned. Not pale, not glowing. A face lined with dirt, eyes sunken but alive. A whisper hissed through the tunnel, urgent but unmistakably human. "Turn that damn light off if you want to live." I killed the beam with a shaky thumb. Darkness swallowed me again, but their shapes were still there, crouched low, watching. My pulse hammered so loud I swore they could hear it. A hand reached out from the dark and tugged me forward. I almost swung the wrench, but the grip was firm, human, warm. "Quiet," a voice rasped. I let them pull me into the chamber. My eyes adjusted, picking out outlines, 3 of them. 2 men, 1 woman, all gaunt, hollow-eyed, clothes torn down to rags, but alive. Their faces carried the same exhaustion etched into my bones. The woman leaned close, whispering fast. "It followed you, didn't it?" I nodded before I could stop myself. One of the men cursed under his breath, fists clenching. The other studied me with a sharp, suspicious stare. "You sure you're you?" I opened my mouth, then shut it. What the hell was I supposed to say? The woman spoke again, softer this time. "You don't glow. That's good enough for now." They guided me deeper into the chamber, where a single lantern burned low, its light shielded by sheets of metal. In its glow, I finally saw them clearly. Skin gray with hunger, hands blistered, nails broken, but their eyes, those were human, filled with the same terror that had been chewing through me since I clawed out of that coffin. I sank to the floor, my legs trembling. The wrench slipped from my hand, clattering too loud in the silence. The sharp-eyed man snatched it up. "Don't drop things down here unless you want it to hear." "It?" I asked. All 3 of them went still. Even the lantern's flame seemed to hesitate. Finally, the woman leaned in, whispering as if the walls themselves were listening. "The copies, the ones in glass, they don't stop once they're awake. They hunt, not just us, they hunt the ones they came from." Her words settled in me like ice water. I thought of the tank, my double pressing its hand to the glass, the crack, the sound of wet feet on steel. I swallowed hard. "So what happens when it finds me?" The sharp-eyed man's stare didn't waver. "Then one of you walks out, and it won't be you." Silence pressed in. The lantern hissed softly. Somewhere in the tunnels, metal clanged, a distant echo, but getting closer. The second man spoke for the first time, voice low and tired. "We can't stay. It's moving again." The woman nodded. She shoved a bundle into my hands, scraps of cloth knotted around a hunk of stale bread and a half-empty canteen. "Eat when you can, move when you must, and whatever you do, don't trust your face." They doused the lantern. Darkness slammed down. I followed them by touch, their steps careful, practiced, the kind of silence born from living too long in fear. We slid into another tunnel, this one colder, air laced with the tang of rust and something sour, like spoiled meat. Behind us, the echo of footsteps followed. Not hurried, not frantic, just steady. The copies didn't need to run. And in that dark, crawling on hands and knees, a thought sank its claws into me. If they could doubt me, if I could doubt myself, how long before I couldn't tell the difference anymore? The tunnel sloped downward, forcing us onto our bellies. My ribs scraped metal as I wriggled through, the weight of the earth pressing from every side. Claustrophobia gnawed at me, but I swallowed it down, copying the rhythm of the others. They'd done this 100 times. I was just trying not to choke on my own fear. The air changed first. Damp, then warmer, tinged with the faintest breath of smoke. We slid out into a cavity the size of a shipping container. Someone had carved shelves into the dirt walls, stacked with scavenged cans, bottles of cloudy water, strips of jerky hard enough to break teeth. Their safe house. The woman lit a wick floating in a jar of animal fat. Its glow painted her face in orange shadows. She looked even older than before, skin leathery, hair brittle, but her hands moved with certainty as she portioned food. The sharp-eyed man sat cross-legged against the wall, still gripping my wrench like he'd never give it back. His gaze never left me. The quiet one busied himself with a crude radio set, wires spilling like veins. He twisted knobs, static crackling. No voice came through. I sat apart, chewing the bread she'd handed me back in the tunnel. It tasted like dust. Finally, she spoke. "We rotate spots every few days. Never stay long. It's never safe." "Safe from what?" I asked, though I already knew. The sharp-eyed man leaned forward, his voice a low hiss. "From you." The bread turned to stone in my throat. "I told you, I'm not one of them." He jabbed a finger at me. "You don't get it. It's not about what you say. It's about what you don't know. They get better. They remember more. The only way we tell is sometimes they slip. A phrase out of place, a gesture wrong." Then he mimed cutting his throat. The quiet one finally turned from his radio. "Enough, Joel. He's breathing. He's hungry. He bleeds. That's enough." Joel spat in the dirt. "Until it isn't." The woman cut between them with a tired voice. "If we waste time fighting, none of us live. That's the only truth here." She looked at me. "What's your name?" I hesitated. "Evan." Her lips pressed thin. "No last names. They stick in your head, and that's dangerous, you'll see." Something in her tone shut me up fast. Hours bled by in that hollow. They dozed in shifts, always one awake, ears tuned for movement. I couldn't sleep. Every drip of water, every groan of shifting soil setting my nerves on edge. At some point, Joel leaned close while the others slept. His whisper was sharp as a knife. "If I see you twitch wrong, Evan, I'll kill you myself." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. The wick burned low. Shadows crawled high on the walls. That's when I heard it. Faint, almost polite. A knock. 3 times. On the tunnel wall outside. Everyone froze. The quiet one killed the radio. The woman's hand clenched mine so hard my knuckles cracked. Joel's eyes lit with hate, not at me but at the sound. Another knock. This time, closer. "Shit," the quiet one breathed. The wick flickered, guttered. For a second, I thought I saw another hand, my own hand, sliding across the wall of the safe house. The woman whispered one word. "Run."